just learned that I have talked about poker for a few minutes and apparently the stream wasn't live yet, so well, it's always practice. And today we are doing some 888 poker again, and I hope I'll get the chat confirmation on do you see the video or not. And when I'm hearing that you'll see the video, then we can pretty much start. And Deya says that she can see me, and that's always good. So, today we are doing some 9 max turbos on 888 poker. And I'm pretty much trying to get the tourneys that open at the beginning. And on 888 poker, I think the first 9-handed turbos that are good games to play are the $3 9 max turbos where the rake is only 10%. On the smaller 9 max turbos, the rake is 20% or 15%, and I think that there are better options to play on 888 poker than 9 max sit and goes if you can't play at the $3 level. So $3 level is pretty much the only sensible level, and that's what we are starting at. I have registered to pretty much every 9 max sit and go I think that is going to be opening. So we should see some games from $3 games, $5.50s, then $9 games, and then $15 games. So the buy-ins are pretty close together when you can see that there is from $3 to $5.50s, then to $9, then to $15. So there are a lot of steps. The unfortunate part is that, as you can see, that I registered to pretty much everything I thought is going to be running, and I'm still having only one table. Although it's just the first minute, so it's going to be a bit quieter. So if you have any questions, they are going to be perfect for this moment. And I can practically also open the lobby on a 9 max turbo on 888 poker. So these are $3 buy-ins. Rake is 30 cents, and as we can see, the main difference on PokerStars structures is that there is no antes on any part of the game. So on 9 max turbos on 888 poker there are no antes. The blinds are increasing every 5 minutes, practically the same as PokerStars. The structure is, I think it's exactly the same, or there might be 250 and 500 limit that probably on PokerStars is only 300 to 600. So the structure is good, and I usually like playing with antes because with antes I can better exploit the tightness that many players are doing on the late stages of the game. So that's something that I think the antes are giving better players better chances of increasing their edge even further. And also antes are, on the other hand, they are making the structure quicker, and with a quicker structure there is less edge, so I don't know. I think that the main point in these 888 poker's games are that usually these games you don't need to game select, because I think pretty much every game that starts is going to be a good game. And good evening, Kaleon. Good evening, Mr. Machinis. Good evening, Deya. Good evening, Snodikin82. Yeah, the Belgium game. So Belgium isn't in the in the final stages, but probably with all the injuries, it was something that was to be expected. And I think that if you are thinking about the four final countries that are remaining, if someone would have guessed that when four countries are remaining, there's Brazil, Germany, Netherlands, and Argentina, I don't think that many people would have thought it twice. Like, there is practically no surprises if you don't think that eliminating Spain and Italy and England early on in the tournament would be a surprise. And Callan, yeah, you can get a better edge with antes, but also there is two sides of the anti coin. Because the antes are also making the structure quicker, and the more hands we get, the more... Even though if we are getting less edge per hand, can we still get more edge in total, if you know what I mean. I'm opening 7 king suited, and I wouldn't be opening an unsuited king 7. And in here there are... I'm having unknown players behind me, so if they're unknown and passive, I don't mind if they are calling, because then I'll have a position anyway in the flop. And when I get 3-bet, this is also an easy hand, because our hand is practically, it's going to be bad enough to not be going to call, or not. We are not going to be calling 3-bets with king 7 suited. And Snodikin 82, yeah, it's always good when a young team goes far in the World Cups, because then you'll know that on the next World Cups, on the next European Championships, you'll probably do way better. And there are other teams that are way older than Belgium. And because of the fact that Belgium was a team that was going through, I heard somewhere online that on the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxies, the American version was censored on the swear words, and in the American translation of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxies, the worst swear word of the all was Belgium, and that was something that was on some World Cup tweets or something that I read. This is a 2-7 flop, and versus an unknown player. I think unknown players in general, they are going to be more looking at their cards, and when they have called a sizable raise pre-flop, I don't think that they are having that much hands that are going to hit that flop, and when they are looking at their hand, they probably are folding some of their good equity there, and they should probably know that only hands that I'm having good equity there as well would be pocket pairs. So, and Mr. McGuinness, yeah, that's a great point, because Calleon is going to have a public-private coaching with Theo tomorrow. So you'll get to see tomorrow, if you'll come to join our public-private coaching, you'll see how a future Supernova Elite, I think Calleon is now something like 42% complete or something, will coach a future Supernova, and I think Theo is something like 75% complete on Supernova this year, so I think it's going to be really interesting on 6max sit and goes. And that's also why we are playing 9max today, because first I thought that we will be playing 6max turbos today, because I thought that Calleon and Theo are going to play 9max sit and goes that I know that Theo has played a lot of. But Theo is widening his range of games that he's playing, and so that's why they are analyzing some of those 6max turbos on PokerStars tomorrow. And hello Neo, good evening. So, and if you haven't seen Kaleon's video on our channel, I'll highly recommend you to check it out, because you rarely see people playing mid-stakes and high-stakes sit-and-goes playing 30 tables at once. And there are also, I think there are pretty interesting stories. And here with Jack 8 we are having an open-ender, but I think that we are having so many bad cards, and there is also an opportunity that our opponent is already having a flush, so that we might be drawing completely dead anyways. If I would have had one diamond, and preferably the Jack of Diamonds, I could have called there. And as Teija already linked the video, there is a video on how you can keep yourself calm even though you are grinding a ton of tables at the same time. And in these games, I have played some of these games and I have seen practically one good player in these games that I have marked as a reg, so I'll say I like these games in general. Kaleon, I think Deja meant sneak peeks on what are you going to do tomorrow? What is going to be the main ingredient of your tomorrow's coaching? I don't like the 4, but I don't think that my opponent is going to be having ace small that often, and I think that even ace king would probably have raised at some point, and on this time not, and I didn't think that our opponents on a raised pot would be likely to have a straight there. There might be some. And actually I think that now that perhaps my river bet was being overly aggressive, and check calling would probably be better equity. But now that we have gotten some of these games running, I think that you can see that in these games, these are $3 and $5.50 games. So, but I think that in these games you'll see that the level of competition is probably about the same in 550s than it's on $1.5 or 50-cent games on PokerStars. So that's pretty insane. Like, if we are looking at this table, for example, that started the earliest, I can pretty much just go here and mark the players that I like to play against, because they are so far away by their stats from what I think that would be profitable in these games, that I can mark them even when they have been playing quite a small amount of hands. So we got like 20 to 30 hands on people, and we got at least 4 players that we like to play against, and there has been at least one elimination that was kinda not good. So that's going to be something that will ease your play at 888 poker, that you will have weaker competition than I think practically on any other site. I have played on OnGame and iPoker and some sites that don't even exist anymore. And I have played something like 35,000 games on Full Tilt Poker, and probably close to 100,000 games on PokerStars, and 888 is by far the softest choice in sit and goes. Against most players, I could open pretty much any 2 cards with something like 2.5x sizing here, But when my opponent is playing 90% of his hands and I'm having a hand that it's not going to be easy to play out of position, I can fold something there. So even though it would be plus EV, and it would be clearly plus EV against the whole population of players, it's not going to be plus EV against a player that plays 90% of his hands and post-flop plays really aggressively. And Mr. McGuinness, you find out that a lot of people limp good starting hands at 888, and as you get others to raise, not saying it's a good idea to just see it quite often to limp ace-king. I don't think it's that good of an idea to limp ace-king or something like that, because you are also getting calls for... If you are raising it, you are also getting stupid calls from people, and you might get re-raised pretty easily. And ace-9 suited is going to be... It's going to be a clear shove even without antes. Something like ace-7 suited, ace-6 suited would be... Or ace-5 suited would be probably the bottom of my range there. And Calleon... Yeah, it's always... I love that we are having air conditioning here in Estonia, because it's making it really hard to think and grind for a long time. If you are completely exhausted by the warmness around you, so it's something that I think that it's also a good investment for a grinder if you are grinding for money in the summertime. It's plus EV to invest for an air conditioning unit, because it makes it so much easier to grind and concentrate for a long time. And Calleon, I think you should type that half-year report here in here as well. That's in the Finnish side. And with Queen 2, I don't like it when we don't have antes, but I think these kind of players are going to be folding way too often for me not to shove pretty much, let's say, at least 80% of my hands against the Torchy guy here. Probably any two cards is going to be a good shove there. And as Calleon says, that the players that are limping a lot, they are going to be nasty players, but they are losing a lot of value, because then you can also limp behind with some hands that for example, you can set mine pretty effectively against those, because when they are having good hands, they are finding it really hard to let go. For example, on we are in position and our hand doesn't hold that much value, so we are going to be continuation betting this flop. And even though we have pair of eights, when there's ace and king already on board, we don't have that much showdown equity. And now I got the $15 game started. I'm going to put it here so that we can see all the... And I'm going to pretty much organize these tables a bit, so you'll see the medium stakes table on 888 poker on the right side, and you'll see the low stakes on the left side. So we can see how much of a difference there is between low stakes and higher stakes. And Calleon, is it a movable air conditioning unit, or is it something that's already installed? Because we are having a lot of room in our Tallinn apartment, and it's it's getting cooled with pretty much just one bigger machine. And Peter Jody, I think that when this is probably even nastier when he min or 3-bet small, because I think that when a player would 3-bet shove in that kind of situation, he would probably have a weaker range when he's shoving compared to when he's raising about half of his stack in. So I think he's leaking information there, and it's going to be something like jacks plus ace king, and with ace queen against that kind of a range, it's just impossible to carry on. And as Caleon said, that especially ace king is a bad hand to limp as you, especially ace king offsuit. Because with ace king offsuit, you really wanna thin the herd, as to say that you want to have less players carrying on the flop. And we don't need to be c-betting even half a pot there. I think that as he's a random, as I said earlier, against randoms, I'm betting a ton of these paired boards, because I have just seen that the random players are either giving you credit, or then they are just looking at their own hands and they're looking like, well, I didn't hit anything, so I can just check fold. So that's something that with the random players, I think it gets you the pot with a small investment really often. And Mr. McGuinness, you have seen a player that was on a 200-day losing streak. I think that's someone has really beaten the variance in the games. And that's by beating the variance in a sense that, well, there are no wins, so there is no variance. And Caleon, if your air conditioning is not movable, and if it's powerful enough, you could also try to improve the circulation of air with some fans to circulate the air to your grinding room more effectively. And that's what we are doing in here, or it's like a hallway away from the floor that we are having our grinding rooms, and sometimes we need to increase the circulation with an additional fan too, when it's really hot in here. But for someone to have a 200-day losing streak, that's pretty much insane. That shouldn't ever happen. And here we got aces, but the player that we would like to play most against is sitting out, so... Or the most likely player to play against us is going to be sitting out, so... It's probably not going to be easy to get value with our aces here, and that makes me a bit sad. And with ace-king, what's a decent raise size in general? It doesn't seem to hit flops too much. And, well, ace-king, it pretty much hits the flop. And here we can see that effectively we are only about 10 big blinds deep. There's the Peter for Jody that is really call happy, and he's in position. So I think shoving is a bit better than... Shoving, especially as good hand as king-jack suited, is going to be better. Better than raising small and folding to Peter for Jody's 3-bet. we don't even have the... Wait a moment. I'm going to be checking, do I have the HUD stats easily somewhere. And I should have them pretty much here. And thank you, Neo, for finding that out, that you can't see my HUD stats. Let's see if that's... So that's what I'm having on my HUD, and mostly with sit and goes with this kind of... And in here we opened and then we got 4 callers, but the pot is just so big. And this would have been great for the hand of aces to get a big sizable 3-bet behind me and then 2 callers, but well, you can't pick the spots. And with King Queen we are going to be getting it all in against Adds Cross. He has been aggressive in position, and with King Queen I don't think that even if he hasn't been that aggressive that we could fold, because King Queen is going to play so well and we are only having 4 BBs. And yeah, welcome to Neo1186 to our forum. And for the stats that I'm using, I'm trying to formulate a picture of what kind the player likely is, and the pre-flop raise size also, I'm now jumping from thing to another, but it's hard to keep a coherent coaching session when there's going to be live hands and questions and everything. And in here it's going to be so easy to shove this ace-king. I don't think that you should change your raise size according to what your hand strength is, because when people are going to find out, and they are going to find out, especially the better regs are going to find out, and when they are going to find out, then you are going to start losing a lot of money to the regs in the games that are... And the big ad player, he hasn't been 3-betting on the early game that much, and now I'm from UTG, so folding 7s is an easy one. So, most likely, or what I'm mostly using for my pre-flop bet sizing is I'm thinking about effectively how deep I'm with my opponent. So if I'm 30 big blinds deep or more, I can open 2.5x. When I'm less than 30 BBs deep, I'm most likely opening just min raising, and when I'm less than 8 big blinds deep, I'm pretty much only shoving. So, and when it's going to be more than 50 BBs or something like 75 BBs on the early stages, I think you can open 3x. 3x and it's going to be fine. And from Neo, so if I'm seeing that the player is something like 24/5, I'm thinking that the player probably doesn't know the optimal strategy in sit and goes. And when I'm seeing a player that probably doesn't know the optimal strategy in sit and goes, but isn't way too wide, I'm thinking that he probably doesn't know the optimal way to shove from SB, and thus he doesn't understand how wide he should call. So that's something that when I don't have a lot of stats, I'm trying to formulate mostly from VPIP and PFR, because they are the stats that are going to be converging the quickest. And I'm trying to use those stats to get an image on what the player probably knows and what the player probably doesn't know, and how he's going to play because of that. And the more hands we are going to have, the more we can use the more advanced stats that we can then look on, like how often our opponent is 3-betting us, how often he's going to be folding his big blind to a steal. And those kind of stats are then going to be more important for... And for example, in here with threes, we are trying to ship it, and we are trying to get the pot here and now, and the Vanman can probably fold after he limps in this situation. And I think that it's better to get it pre-flop all in than to get this big 6 ad player to come along for the pot. So and this time we didn't run good on that, but that doesn't matter. We'll got the next game. And that's probably one of the good things in sit and goes, because it also makes it really hard for you to tilt on some player on the table, because you are pretty much, if some player outdraws you or outplays you, or you are making a stupid mistake for some reason, you can pretty much just open a new sit and go, and it's pretty likely that the same player isn't on the same position against you on the next game. So I think that's going to be good. And here we are going to be 3-betting sizably against these two opponents, and we are not having a position. Ace King off isn't going to be a hand that plays that well. And now we are without position, we are playing a sizable pot. If we would have hit an ace or a king, we would have tried to just get it all in. And when we don't hit, we don't have position. It's just going to be playing passively with ace king off, but it's what it is. You'll hit 1 out of 3, and I'm hoping that if I'm hitting an ace, I can stack someone with a weaker ace. I don't think the smaller pocket pairs are going to be minus EV at 888, as people are going to be calling so wide, because there are also people that are limp folding with a 3 big blind stack, and something that's pretty much that you can instantly see that, well, this can't be good. And I'm going to be raising it. It's a very drawy board, and with aces, I think that my opponent is going to be having a draw and or a top pair and a draw, or a pair and a draw, and with aces I'm going to be in a good shape. And now my opponent had a ready-made straight, and we were drawing to a pretty few outs, but we outdraw our opponent, and that's great. But our opponent's call with 9-7 off, that's something that's not going to be good in the long run. And he donk bets. Now that's something that So I'm going to be writing a note on this Sir Beef Pie, and I'm writing a note that he donk bets small flop straight with 9-7 off. So that makes it pretty likely that our player is he's playing a lot of hands that he shouldn't be playing, and also our opponent is quite likely going to be betting every time that he has a great hit, and that makes me, or that enables me to, when he leaks the information by donk betting again with a great hand, then I can fold more easily when I have written a note on the player's tendencies earlier on. And with the pocket pairs, they are in certain sense they are really good hands to play, because you pretty much always know what the hand value is. That in 9-max games, if you are not hitting a set and there are overcards, you aren't getting your money in like you would have getting your money in. For example, I think most of the beginning players are doing huge mistakes with something like ace sevens and stuff like that when they are calling weak aces, and then they are going to be, and here with side effect we are going to be raise calling, and he shoves with ace 6, 9-6 off. Well, that might be even a good shove, depends on how he views my raising and calling ranges there. But I agree with Mr. Machinis that I want to have... I like if I'm getting with a small pocket pair, if I'm getting the pot here and now, because most likely if someone is getting me action, it's either from a dominating bigger pocket pair or then it's going to be a flip. And I needed to close a door. There was some noise that was annoying me. And now I'm busy with all of the action I'm going to have on all of the tables at the same time. And Mr. Machinis, yeah, like if you are thinking about what would be the optimal way to lose as much as possible in the games, in the sit and goes, it would be playing really wide and stacking off really easily in the early game, and then being really tight in the end game. And you can see some of these players that have been playing a really wide range of hands on the early stages of the game. They are suddenly, and this is horrible on Sara S76, that he's limp calling king queen off there, so he's inducing more action when in fact it would make most sense for him or her to be trying to make me fold as much as possible and avoiding a collision there, because ICM wise it makes it horrible if he widens my range. It's more minus EV for her if my range widens than it would be if he would just shove it and make my range tighter in that spot. And Mr. Machinis said that Deia's voice can't be too annoying. You are right, Deia's voice is never too annoying, but her computer, her laptop, it's something that's a laptop of horrible noises, and that's something that's a bit problematic. And as Callion said, that 9-6 off is going to be always a very optimistic re-steal hand. I think in that situation, if we are looking at from his perspective, when does it make sense? And it does make sense. I presume that it does make sense for my opponent to be re-stealing with 9-6 off if he's thinking that I'm going to be folding something like 2/3 or 70% of my range there, and then it would be probably plus EV to do pretty much any two cards re-steal there. And we have actually, with these aces, I would have preferred to get some action, but with those other hands, I'm pretty stoked that we have now increased our stack size by not showing our cards from the clearly the shortest stack to be the second shortest stack. And that's pretty much that's the accurate description that Deia's computer sometimes sounds like it's going to be. It's planning a trip to another planet or something. And now I'm having about 7 tables, and I think that I'm trying to keep it pretty much here so that we are always getting some action-filled tables to discuss about. Min 3-bet there from a fishy player. I'm going to be calling it, and on the top right we are in the money, and we are in the money in the biggest tournament. So now we are pretty much doing it the way it should be done. And the way it should be done is to win the biggest tournaments. And I'm hoping that my opponent, when there's going to be a tree, I hope my opponent is going to be shoving there. And when he isn't shoving, we are going to be shoving, because I think with the jack we are going to be way ahead of his range. And jack 10 suited bottom, no play with. I need to check the hand. In general, jack 10 suited, if it was unopened, it will be a mistake for. And actually it was the Sara S76 that has been raising a really tight range. And then we are not playing with jack 10 suited. And if it would have been some other player with wider range, we could have tried to do something like a stop and go or. But this kind of player that we are probably not going to make her fold, as we have seen with the king-queen hand on the top right table. And actually that makes this player earn a tag for I like to play with that player. And when we are having the middle pair, I'm going to be doing a thin value bet here. I think that I'm going to have a best hand, and I think that my opponent is going to be calling there. And with Juggernaut, even though we have seen that he has raised folded, I don't think that. And in here we are trying to annoy this Saraes a bit too, because we are going to be calling this anyway, and he's got the stone cold nuts. So we got the money in with trip sixes, but our opponent had the not best hand that he could. And now I folded a hand on this top right table when I was trying to explain the other table. I timed out in a hand that I really should have been shoving. But it depends on the player on how often do I think that I can get the player to fold. That's probably the most important. And with 6 big blinds, that's something that's probably going to be plus EV as a shove, even though there is a short stack on the same table. And Snodikin says, sometimes I shove it and hope for the best, not good. I think that that's something that we can also discuss later. Actually, now I already lost the hand, because that could have been an interesting hand to look through with the Hold'em Resources calculator. I'll see if I can find the hand easily. And when I'm trying to find the hand, I'm almost sitting out, and when my opponent sees me almost sitting out and then bets small. I'm thinking that he doesn't have anything, but he just tries to get me to fold. So I'll be calling a small bet here, but now when he bets big, then I think that he probably will have something that's... Not quick enough, not quick enough. Sometimes I really hate this poker tracker, like really hate it when it always... I'm trying to get the Jack 10 suited hand, then I see it, then it imports a new hand and then it throws me back to the... It throws me back to the top. And I don't get it why that's a good idea. Actually, ace-6 suited would have been a shove here. I'm just way too stamped to try to get the hand to be a marked hand. But we'll discuss more about this. And in here, when we are in the money and our opponent just limps, I'm going to be shoving and trying to just cash in on the equity with the 10 queen suited. If I get called, it's most likely I'm going to have decent equity anyways. And when our opponent with the biggest stack is sitting out a lot, we need to focus on that table to really abuse the situation, because that's pretty much one of the best situations to be in, that the biggest stack is leaking equity like a sieve. And I bet that when Kaleon opened the blog, that would be something that will be really interesting material to read. So Kaleon is one of our coaches, and he will be doing his first public private coaching for us next Monday, and it will be also the first coaching session in English that he's going to be doing. And now we are in a heads up, and I wonder in this 888 poker, because sometimes you are getting the huge piles of cash with some of these games. And I wonder why I'm not getting the huge piles of cash in this game. Especially when I'm winning and it's the biggest game I'm playing thus far. With fives, when there are ace, king and jack, I don't think that we are going to be beating anything. And now this Juggernaut 85 would need to fold anything else than kings or aces, because of the ICM situation in the table. And Kaleon asks, shoving a Jack 5 off in the left table versus anyone. I think it's the top left table that you are referring, and I'm not going to shove it against anyone. I think that this opponent has been playing... We don't know pretty much anything about this guy. He hasn't been playing that aggressive on previous games, so I'm giving him the benefit of a doubt. If he would have been aggressive three-handed, I would have probably shoved the king 7 off. And now we don't even know that much on him on the heads up anyways, because the stats will lie, because the opponent has been sitting out so much of the game. And unfortunately we lost the lost a big pot there, and I think that he now got the... He got a bit of a bigger stack than me, so that was a lost game, unfortunately. That would have been great too, and we got a really good amount of equity in the game because our opponent was sitting out for a while. And now I'm trying to get something like, I don't know, 7 or 8 tables going pretty soon, so that we would have interesting amount of tables to end this session, and we are trying to keep it under 2 hours because I have noticed that if I'm doing a session that's more than 2 hours, I can't edit the video clip on YouTube and take the bad stuff out and just make it most interesting in the to view later on. And Marcus Y, yeah, it would be cool to play a live tournament heads up with a huge pile of cash and the opponent, other players sitting out. I think I would feel like what are the guys called in the Donald Duck series, the guys that are always in jail? I would feel like a robber there, probably. Probably to just trying to get the opponent as... And here, like with Ace King, we are getting an easiest call, but with even King Queen, it would be an easy call, even against this kind of a player. And I think King 7 off is okay to flatten table too. Yeah, flatting would be a decent option as well. And actually, flatting is probably when we don't know anything about our opponent and we know that our opponent is likely tight. Flatting is probably going to be the best option there, and I just first thought about 3-betting and then I forgot about flatting, and I shouldn't be doing that. You should always be thinking about what will be the best option to do. And in here we are going to be calling a river bet. If our opponent checks the turn, I don't think that he's going to be having a decent hand, and he called us on the flop with Ace 8 with a backdoor flush draw, and then the flush draw got through. Well, good for him and good for us if he's calling like that later on when we are having a real hand. But so we are starting the next phase of games, and they are going to be the last games that we are doing. And I don't know if Deia has already written a thread on a promotion that we might be having, because today on the 24-hour poker we had insane value. We got 5 players registered to a free roll with 150 euros and a free private coaching as the prizes. So the prizes were worth more than 200 euros, or I think it's now closer to $300. And in the game there was also 2 players of those 5 were sitting out, so the values were something like 65 euros per person in the free roll, and the free roll was won by Chanfes. That's our cash game coach, and because Chanfes won the session, he's going to be holding the coaching he got. He's going to be holding it as a prize. So, and he thought that it would be awesome to do a public private coaching in English on No Limit Hold'em cash games. And we had talked that it would be awesome for getting it in our English forums and then trying to hold a bit of a competition on how you should write on why you would need coaching from Chanfes, and you can be in the private public coaching. I think it was the 15th of July. So it will be a Tuesday, and you need to have a microphone and you need to have Skype, but that's pretty much it. So you can participate on the live coaching, and the coaching will be broadcasted through the YouTube channel later on. So you'll also need to be aware that your nick probably will be visible during the coaching. And as Deija has written in the chat, if there are no limit hold'em cash game players, there is now a possibility to get free public-private coaching on 15th of July. And you should thank Janfes on thinking about it. And there will be also, I think, with this public-private coaching, there might be a total of 3 English coachings for No Limit Hold'em. And in here, I'm trying to hide my stack size a bit when I'm only having 3 big blind stack, and I think that I need to be shoving here, and my opponent is pretty likely that he knows some of the basic strategy, and if I would have shoved, he would probably be calculating his pot odds pretty correctly and going to be calling with pretty much any 2 cards there. And Caleon, you're also saying that if our villain flats preflop with ace-8 suited, he cannot fold to a c-bet in such a flop. Yeah, that would make sense that he wouldn't fold, but I think in general players are going to be folding in those situations way too much. And that's why it was a bit surprising. But of course, when the flop is paired and there is... When the flop is paired, it would make sense that I'm also pretty rarely having a strong hand there. So... But I don't think that most of the players in these games are thinking about what I'm having. They are mostly when there are random players in those kind of situations, they are more likely they are just thinking on. And this is a nasty spot in here. We are having a medium pocket pair, but that smells so much like a rivered straight. Because of so big of a value bet compared to size of the pot. We are having 6 tables running. We are having 7 tables running. Oh well, time to put on the grinding pants and start grinding. 8-6 suited, no shove, bottom left. I'll need to check the situation a bit later on. It might have been that because they're on the 8-6 suited, I think that it was a situation when there was the big bad player on the big blind. No, it wasn't. It should have been a shove. So that was a good notification from Snodikin. And with 84 chips, actually that's also a mistake, or that's a small mistake with 5 queen off, because in 888 poker, because there are no antes in these games, you don't need to be as aggressively getting your money in than if there would be antes, and you can wait for a good hand if you are getting if you are getting a really short stack, because your stack is not going to be, it's not going to dwindle away. So that's something that you should really take into account in these games, because there aren't antes. This is one of those situations where your strategy differs a lot from the PokerStars late game strategies. I opened Kokinho called, and now that we got extra equity with the open-ended straight draw, I'm going to be calling the second time. Our opponent donk betted the flop and then carried on with the turn with complete air. Oh well, I'm not going to be folding middle pair there with the small blind versus blind situation. And as Caleon says that it's too often value, I think, and that's why I was folding as well, because I have seen that when people are, when it looks like a duck, when it quacks like a duck, it is exactly a duck. And when it looks like value, when it smells like value, it's going to be a value bet. And if I'm going to be paying off value bet there with the bluff catcher, that would make me a stupid poker player. And I don't like to feel stupid when I'm playing, but I like to feel stupid when I'm learning. He check-raised me. That's a bit weird. And when he check-raised me, there will be some flush draws that will come through and some straight draws as well. And so this 8, when it completes a lot of straight draws and flush draws, it's going to be probably one of the most horrible cards there can be. And yeah, that's something that we should always say, that please, if you are watching this via YouTube, please use the 180p or 720p at least. 180p, then you can see my HUD clearly, and then you can see the HUD clearly, and you can feel the bass in my voice, and everything will just be sunnier and results will be better and everything. So full HD for the masses. We are broadcasting all of our poker broadcast at full HD, so that's what you should view them at to get the best experience. And for Vlor, usually with the full HD, it takes a while before it changes the stream quality. So you are still seeing and if the stream quality doesn't change, pause the broadcast when your settings are on 180p and then press play again, and then it should change the stream quality instantly. Snodikin82 asks a really good question, that when my opponents now saw when my opponent saw me shoving Jack-10 off, would I now tighten up? I don't think that I have to tighten up, because I'm also having the biggest stack here, and the Jack-10 off, it's not a wild shove. It's not something like it's not an any two shove. It's a really decent hand shove, so I'm not tightening up. And usually in these situations, when we are having only a small amount of hands on each other, I don't usually adjust from the first, because the players that know how to adjust to it correctly, they are playing a lot of tables and not paying as much attention as they should. And those players that don't know how to adjust on that correctly, they will see the hand and they might make a judgment there, but they are not going to be adjusting correctly. So if I'm shoving the second time and I'm not adjusting to what I perceive that my opponents might be adjusting, if I shove and I get called with the... After I have shoved with Jack 10, then if I'm shoving the next time and I'm getting called from something like Queen 5, then I'm going to be adjusting when I have seen that the opponents have way over adjusted to my tendencies. And Vlor, did you try to pause the stream and restart it again? And Marcus, why haven't you seen on like all of the TV commercials that they are doing that this is now the Sony 4K 200 Hz game, and when you buy this television then your favorite team will win every game that you are watching on that TV, and everything will be so good and so fine, and you can see the player that hasn't shaved in the morning compared to the player that has shaved in the afternoon, and stuff like that. That's usually on the TV broadcasts. Or TV commercials. And as you probably know, most of that is marketing bullshit. But the sound quality and video quality isn't bullshit. The results will be better. That was the marketing bullshit. The results will be exactly the same if you are looking at this stream from Full HD or 240p. Except if you are looking this stream at 240p, you are probably not seeing the results, and you need to just trust me what the results are going to be. Vlor, could you try to reload completely the YouTube stream? If it would work then. And now I'm actually, if I'm still registered on some games, I will unregister on those games. Unreg. And unreg, so that these are going to be the final games that we are going to play. And King 3 suited, it was really close. If he would have shoved like 150 chips less, I would have called with King 4 suited. And I need to have a reminder here. With aces, it's always going to be, we are just looking on how do we get the most amount of money in. And we are always going to, in preflop, we are pretty much always going to get our money in well with ace king suited. And in here with ace 9 suited, our opponent isn't folding that much, so I'm going to be dunking there. And our opponent was also dunking against us with a weak hand, so let's see how he reacts to this. Actually, we are having a three-way pot, then the dunk is even better. And now we can dunk ship it when we got the re-raise, and that's actually something that I should have taken into account with this Joel Morris, that always in those kind of situations, if you're having a short stack, our dunk bet sizing needs to be small enough that the opponent with a short stack will have twice as many chips at least left. So if he shoves all in, we want it to reopen betting, and we want to have an opportunity to get it all in with a monster draw. And Kaleon, how about flatting aces in table 4? I don't think that we are going to get a reggy looking player to misplay his hand if we are going to be flatting here. I think that we are, if a player is looking reggy, I think we are getting more out of him if we are going to shove, because it will look a lot like like a value hand if we are going to be calling it there. And now that we are, and that's actually something that's really ugly, because the Cetus ICM has been on the previous bubbles, he has been folding a lot of his hands, and now he got like ace queen there, and that's probably around the bottom that he will call, because the M. Babkin is a shorter stack there, and he's kind of needy as well. But I like Kaleon's thinking that you should always be looking outside of the box as well. That if you are just having like two options, there's an opportunity to also just call with the aces, and the opportunity to just call with the aces, then we need to, how our opponent will perceive if we are only flatting there, and will he play with a tighter or wider range if we flat there. And if we flat there, there's a next question. If we flat there, is there going to be any flops that the opponent is going to be folding? Because even then, if his range is going to be wider, but we are getting less money in, it's probably not going to be as good. As good as just the percentages would show you. And I wholeheartedly agree with Kaleon that there will be not 4K material in Finland for many years. But the 4K televisions are also, they're going to be good, because the interpolation or the scaling to higher resolution, when you are having more pixels there, I think the old digital TVs will look a bit better on 4K televisions when the scaling can be done with more pixels. So there will be some advantage, and we pretty much hit what we want. We are hitting a set, and there's an ace on the table. I didn't see bet there, because I think that if our opponent isn't having an ace, if our opponent is having an ace there, we are getting our monies in anyway. If our opponent is going to have an ace, we are getting our money in anyway. And actually, we could have shipped the turn. Actually, it probably would have been better when there is a draw opportunity. So that was a misplayed hand again. And that's also something that you should be aware of, that I have played poker professionally for multiple years. I have played something like, I think my total of sit and goes is somewhere around 150,000 or something. And I'm still making mistakes. It's not the end of the world if you are making mistakes, if you are learning, if you are improving, and if you are not making you don't need to be perfect, you just need to be better than your opponents. Four-three off. If you could say on what table, it will make it a lot easier for me. With 9-queen, queen-9 off, it's going to be, even though I don't think that our opponent is going to be shoving Nash, and now we know that he's shoving wider than Nash. And even with Nash, it's going to be queen-9 suited is going to be a great call. And now when we know that our opponent is going to be shoving us wider than Nash, then we are going to also also call him wider than Nash, and that should have been a shove from me. And actually, when my opponent now ships, first I misclick and then my opponent ships, and then I'm thinking that this might be even better to fold there. And with Jack 7, it's going to be about 7 big blinds, and we are having 6 big blinds, and our opponent is insane, so... And I'm not that afraid of... I should have been more afraid of a flush. And when you are doing multiple mistakes on multiple tables, it gets hard on your concentration, and you are going to be blaming yourself about it. And one good way to try to remove the tilt it might cause you is to be taking deep breaths. 7-3 suited is actually on the edge. I thought about shoving even if it's outside Nash. But that's also something that if you are prone to tilting, in getting your emotions back in check as quickly as possible becomes more and more important. And Calleon, I'm quite often amazed on quite many regs in PokerStars in mid-stakes shove way too wide in heads up. I have been amazed in that as well, but I think in general our opponents will be calling a bit too little. So when they are calling a bit too little, then shoving more than Nash becomes good. So I think that even though it's readless, it's better to shove more than Nash, even in PokerStars mid-stake games that I have played a ton. There are multiple players that it's a mistake to shove wider than Nash, especially the players that are going to notice that if you are shoving wider than Nash, and actually that's something that I should be writing down. And that's something that's a prototype of a note that it's going to make you money. It's to the point. You'll know that your opponent, when he shoves wider than Nash, then you know how to abuse it. And against some opponents it might be that you are going to be... Against some opponents, it might be that you are folding some hands that would be Nash calls, because the opponents aren't going to be shoving as wide as Nash. This is going to be a bit of a special play, because this big blind is sitting out. I'm trying to get some free chips for me in that pot. And Calleon, yeah, when you are calling at least Nash, you are making money on them. But if your basic ranges are only going to be Nash ranges in shoving, I think that you might be playing too tightly against population. And this has been quite an insane heads up, because we haven't been so deep, but we have just We have just moved the chips around a lot. And that's also something that I haven't, or I don't see in players that aren't that good often enough, that they aren't going to be shoving these 8-5 suited, even though it would be extremely easy for you to be printing a Nash equilibrium shove chart or something and not make those stupid mistakes. And that's something like if you are making a chart to yourself and you are using it, if you are getting to a printing house, it probably costs you 20 cents, and if you are playing even $1 sit and goes 20 a night, you are going to get the 20 cents in EV back when you are learning the better ranges. $9-5 off. And Caleon is talking a lot of sense in the chat, that always take your opponents into account. And Nash range is when heads up turbo sit and go is quite hard. No, it's actually perfect when the stack sizes on average, they are going to be... When the stack sizes on average are really small, then it makes a lot of sense to use the Nash push fold charge. And something like Jack 4 suited, it's going to be plus EV shoved to somewhere around 15 big blinds. So if you are not shoving something like Jack 9 suited or Jack 4 suited, I think in general you are going to be losing value. Because this is the bubble, I'm not shoving, but I'm enticed to shove the... And now when there are just 2 or 3 players behind me, I'm going to be min raising and I'm trying to hide my stack size this time as well. Oh crap. And with any 2 cards, we are going to be calling it when we have just 30 chips left or something. So these are going to be the final 2 games of the evening. And this other game, it's in the bubble phase, and we are having 3 players that we are practically in folding wars against, and then there is the one huge stack, and now we are pretty... On the turn, our opponent with the short stack is having 0 out, so... It's going to be great for us because we are in the money again. And Caleon, yeah, versus some players it's profitable to raise even like 8 to 10 BBs deep, and versus some players it might make sense to even limp somewhere around 6 BBs deep, because they are from against the limp stab, they are folding way too much. So it's player dependent, and it's something that you always should think on, how you can exploit your opponents most. But it also, in these games, like in 888 poker, because I have so little hands on my opponents, you'll probably see here more something that's going to be readless ranges in heads up, because we are not having a lot of reads, and you always also see how the reads are going to start developing when we are getting more hands on our opponents. And Mr. McGuinness, how about if your opponent is Nash unaware plus EV, then yeah, if you are shoving Nash equilibrium against an opponent that's Nash unaware, it's going to be plus EV, but you should be calling tighter. And now we pretty much know that we get screwed when we get snap called. But our opponent snap calls us with King 10 off. Like, that doesn't make pretty much any sense. It might be a profitable call, but it shouldn't be an easy snap call. And I need to remind you that if you like what we are doing here, please subscribe to our channel. When you are watching this on YouTube, please press the like button. It means a lot to us if you are liking these, because then we are getting our material to more people, and the more material we can create, the more audience we have. And also register to our forum, because the more members we have on our English community, the more we are going to be producing English content. So that's something that I want you to know. And Marcus, yeah, now with only one huge table with HD quality, this result will be awesome. I hope so, because we haven't won a single tournament. I think we are breaking even. We are breaking even for today. I'll need to check it. Actually, we are exactly breaking even. So after what we got from the points on 888 poker, we are probably a bit ahead, but we are teetering at the edge of profitability. And with Ace Queen, it's going to be such a good hand that even though there is a Throner B, that we are going to be raising all in, and it is not a catastrophe if he's calling, but I still hope that he's going to be folding, because the second place money is going to be good, and the opponent is going to be pretty clearly all in. But now that we are having an even-sized stack against our opponent, it will make a difference in our game, because now we can play against him a lot more. And as Deja said, that don't forget to check our July schedule. The registered members can see the poker nights that we have planned for July, and we might have a total of 12 poker nights in English in July, and that will be pretty awesome, because before this the most we have had has been 7, so we have been increasing the English production a bit for this month. And Neo1186 said that you shoved 5s into big stack despite short stack being nearly out. Yeah, and that's something that we can look more closely with Hold'em resources. And I'm just trying to get as much money in as we can. But that's actually a really good hand to mark as well. And as Caleon said, that was a loose raise call with Queen Jack suited. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, because my range in that kind of situations to shove is going to be really tight. So practically the best case scenario for Pia Pia would be that I'm going to be shoving 10s or 9s or Ace King, because all the other hands I'm dominating him with. So it's not going to be a good call in any situation. And Mr. Machinis, do you think that most sit and go players, when they get heads up, are knowing what they are doing? No. There are even, I think, decent regs that are playing break even or losing a bit and making a bit of money after Supernova rate back at PokerStars 30s and 60s, and I think they are playing horrible heads up and they are having huge leaks. So there are players that are, for example, in hypers, they have only one. Pretty much they are not doing anything else in heads up except raising and fold, or shoving or folding. And when in some hypers, it might be that I'm seeing some of the opponents to be just shoving when it's 20 BBs deep. Then I'm knowing that they just don't know anything about heads up, and they're just trying to play it the easy way. And then there is going to be multiple options for me to me to utilize my edge on them. I don't think that I'm going to be, or I'm that good in heads up. I think, for example, for our coaches, Julos Pro and Caleon are probably better. But I'm still winning a lot more often in heads up than losing. And as Caleon said, that this opponent should be open shoving versus a good opponent. And I'm actually a bit unsure that if he open shoves, could I even call with? And that's also a good question. That could I even call with the ace queen hand if we are thinking that our opponent would be... And now that our opponent hasn't folded to any of my heads up hands, then I'm going to be not opening 100% in this kind of situation. And if my opponent is going to be in the situation with the queen jack suited, if he's going to be limping there, he shouldn't be limp calling even. It should be a limp fold. And when my opponent just calls me here, I think that he's really rarely having an ace or a better king, so I'm going to be pretty much 3-barreling here. And I'm doing it for value. And Marcus Y is saying it wisely that sometimes in heads up, if your whole stack is at risk, it might make more sense if the opponent is going to be really tight and letting you steal his blinds anyway to just utilize that. And that's not only true in heads up. The frustrating part is that it's true in every part of the game. Like, there are people that are shoving a lot, and then people that are calling really marginal calls, even though the whole table would be really tight and you can just abuse the whole table with small raises pretty much in perpetuity. And then you might see some of the regs make something that if the opponent is going to play any two cards, it's going to be plus 0.1 call, and it's not going to be that good. And I thought that this could be something that I have had some of those worst hands now, and my opponent doesn't like to fold, so... And we have seen that our opponent has folded a lot post-flop. So I'm trying to steal the pots post-flop as much as I can, and now I got like surprise value. I think that I'm having the best hand, but I don't think that I'm getting more than 2 streets of value, and now I know that I'm having the best hand. And let's go all in. Woohoo! And now it's time to look on some of the hands, and with this final win, we actually did manage to win something on this set. Let's see. Let's see how much did we won today. Win 1. How much did we win today? I think it's something like 15 bucks or something. And if our ROI is 12%, I think that's not too shabby, and our EV adjusted ROI would be something like 33%. Well, we ran good. Or we ran good in getting to situations that we could have won a lot more, but we didn't run good in cards wise. So let's go to my reports and see if we are... And yeah, that was like the most awesome river of them all. And let's see the marked hands only from today. And now I need to close the 888 poker, so always always when you are using Hold'em resources calculator, make sure that your poker sites aren't open. It's not allowed to use Hold'em resources calculator at the same time as you are playing on a poker site. And we can start with the ace queens. So in ace queen hand, I think that this is pretty self-explanatory. When our opponent min raises, it becomes a good shove for me no matter what. But when there is this small stack, does it make more sense for me to be folding if my opponent would shove pre-flop? And would it be profitable for my opponent to shove queen jack suited? And yeah, the runner both is awesome there. So we'll copy this hand history, and with the Hold'em resources calculator we are going to be doing the basic hand. Then we are pasting the hand from clipboard. We are doing the structure as a full ring structure. This is the 50% for the winner, 30% for the second, and 20% for the third. And in here, if my opponent would shove any two, even against an any two range, ace queen off is a losing call. And if I'm calling ace queen off there, I'm losing like 1% of the prize pool. And when it's a $9 sit and go, it's something like $70. So if I'm calling with ace queen off and my opponent would be shoving any two cards, I would be losing around, I think, 80 cents. And if my opponent is raising smaller than any two, something like 70%, all the beautiful hands shoving here, let's say like he's going to be folding all of the crappiest possible hands, we can see then that the ace queen off is, it's not getting really that much worse, but it's going to be closer to a buck of losing. Or like if we are thinking that our edge against our opponents would be something like 8%, if we are calling this mistake at itself cost us almost 2 games played well. So these are important mistakes. And how about if I make my opponent's range capped in this? And I don't like to cap it completely, but this is something that I like to do, that I'm liking to just decrease the weight of the top range. Actually checks also that now that my opponent is going to play just 30% of his top range, so it's going to be... And even then, if my opponent is playing some of his top range but not all by raising, then it's still... I don't think that even if I'm taking the range as completely uncapped or completely capped with and losing all of the hands that are dominating us, I still think that we are not going to make ace queen a profitable call. And that's something, and we can also try the 100% and not any dominating hand here. And I'd still believe that it's going to be ace queen as a fold. And I think the magic word in here is that, and this would be a good hand to take up in the hand analysis forums, on calculating this up with an ICM calculator by hand on what would it require, how much equity do we require in this kind of a spot. And I think I'm going to do it a bit later on, so look at our hand analysis forums, or perhaps I'll make it a task for someone to look, and that's also good practice for practicing how to use the, or how to see the ICM situations. Then there are other questions, and Neo1186 asked about these fives, and these fives, crap. These fives, in this situation, we had like 738 chip player here, and we are having almost 10 big blinds, but I just think that fives are going to be a hand that is going to be played so well that it's going to be... And how about if I edit the short stack size a bit? I will edit it a bit, but I'll make this calculate first. So if I'm editing... Actually, now I need to copy it again. And that's also a good question, and that's something that separates the good players from the bad players, is to ask other questions like how much stack size would need to be in this Honor B's stack size for it to be profitable to call ace queen off in here if our opponent would be shoving any two. And that's actually going to be quite the sizable amount. If he would have a 2000 chip stack, then it would be okay. And ace queen off is going to be marginally profitable with if our opponent is having 7.5 big blinds. And Calleon, I don't think that you might have been too loose in that spot, but there is a reason for this as well, because in PokerStars, when there are antes, you'll also get more future game value when your opponent is going to be getting all in from the antes and blinds more easily, and also that there is more money in game. I think that with antes it's going to be closer to something like 6. If we are having the stars, PokerStars blind structure, then it changes a bit. Bit like then only ace king off will be break even, and we can compare this to an ante structure and how much does the antes matter there. That if we are comparing, this is the ante structure 0.11 and without ante 0.06, but the ranges look, actually they are exactly the same ranges, it's just more plus EV when the antes are on. Mr. Machinis, it's all about pot odds, and now that I'm not importing hands, I can actually probably see the hand here. And I believe the hand was... It wasn't... I remember that it was 2 red... 2 red cards and it was king and a 4, but I can't seem to find it. It was king 3 suited. And my opponent raised 1240 chips here. And if we are calculating it out, we need to call 1240 chips to fight for a pot of 3.2k, so we are requiring about 36%, and actually this is probably, if we are looking at this with Nash ranges as well, I think actually king 3 suited gets to be a call, but just 200 chips is going to be making a huge difference in here, like it becomes the 36% comes only 32%, so when the stack sizes are small, even small changes in stack size will make our range a whole lot different. And actually king 3 suited would be profitable with against the 29% range. And when we are plotting a range versus hand equities in here for king 3 suited, we can pretty much see that if our opponent shoves over 23%, it comes okay to be calling with king 3 suited. And if we are changing this situation a bit, so we are doing 1-4-40 in here, And Calleon, it's close to a 3.5k pot. There are no antes, so I think it's not that close. And now we have here with the larger stack size, and let's do it here again with the plot range versus hand equities. On the big blind, king 3 suited. And now we can see that if we are comparing that our opponent's stack size is changing only 200 chips, half of a big blind. In here we require our opponent to be shoving somewhere around 22 to 23% to make it okay to be calling. But in here, if our opponent is shoving over 14%, it's going to be plus EV. And it's not going to be bad even if our opponent is shoving 9%. So it makes a huge difference for a hand like king 3 suited that we are not having that great of an equity there. So that's something that's, I think it's really well visualized in these two graphs on how much does the 200 chips move these graphs x-axis 0 spot to the left. And I think that, and Calleon 100,600 times 2 plus 200, it's only plus 100 because I'm on the big blind with the, and there are no antes in these games, so. But now I already lost track of the let's do a restart. On the 5's hand that Neo1186 asked about, why did I shove it here? And let's look it through so we can see is a shove good or bad, and I think with any pocket pair shove is going to be pretty good in here. And actually it's a surprise that 5's is going to be break-even, but also deuces, it's not going to be bad even if opponents are... I think these opponents' ranges are quite sensible. If our opponent is calling a bit too much, I don't still think that 5's are going to be terrible. And actually we can also with 5's, it doesn't become terrible even if our opponent is going to be calling us too much. And Calleon, also Rex can be with like 40% of the range there in UTG. And yeah, it was 6-handed and in the UTG, but when I'm having a random player there, I just can't think that the random player would note how to desperation shove. And in 888 poker, if you are thinking that your opponents are going to be loose and passive, it's going to be the correct assumption more often. And I think like in a mid to high stake sit and go on PokerStars, if you are having an unknown player, I think it's more likely the unknown player to be tight and aggressive or tight and passive than loose and passive, so it makes a huge difference. But that's also a really good point that Rex can be with like 40% of the range there. And this was also one of these situations that can we do a stop and go here, and we can also simulate stop and goes with Hold'em Resource Calculator if we are looking like how much does Saras need to be opening from UTG and how much does she need to be folding so it would be profitable for us to be in the hand with Jack 10 suited. And in here Saras is going to be, we are looking at 3-bet calculations, and it's going to be exactly the same mathematics if we are looking at 3-bet mathematics or stop and go mathematics, because only thing that we are interested in is how often is our opponent going to be folding. But all the chip sizes are exactly the same, only the amount of folds and the equity that we are having, those are the things that are going to change. But with Saras, if she opens 18%, like Queen Jack suited would be profitable even for a Nash shove. And that would require Saras to fold about 50% of his hands. And we can look this hand also from Saras's point of view. Then we can plot range versus hand equities, Arnimets, and then we can go to Jack 10 suited. And with Jack 10 suited, we can see pretty much that it gets plus EV if opponent calls closer to 10%, something like 11%, actually less, 10.5%, then it gets plus EV. So our opponent would need to be folding to my resteal here about 40% of the time. And I don't think against the player that we have seen Saras to be like min raise calling with king queen off, that we are going to get her fold against a small raise even 40% of his hands. And I think it's going to be more likely that if he's opening the 17%, he's going to be calling something like 15% against our small raise, and on our stop and go it's probably something like 10 to 12%. So I hope that answered your questions that you had during the coaching session. And I think it's going to be pretty much time to end because we are nearing the 2-hour deadline on YouTube. And I like to remind you at this end part that tomorrow on 9 o'clock Finnish time, 6 in the evening GMT, or 8 o'clock Central European time, there is going to be Calleon's public-private coaching on TO, or with TO on 6max Turbo sit and goes on PokerStars. It's going to be a future Supernova Elite coaching a future Supernova, so the strategy should be a bit more advanced during the evening. And also, if you want to have no limit cash game coaching, you should look at the Janfess's offer. And so there is a possibility to just write a good explanation why do you need coaching on no limit cash games, and you might get free public private coaching in about a week. And that's about it. And there wasn't even any football today, so there's nothing about that. So if you are going to sleep, have a good night. And if you are carrying on playing poker today, may this be the most winningest night of them all. See you next time. Bye.